1 week before the wedding, my fiancée spent a fortune to buy the copyright of a novel. The reason? It was written by her ex-boyfriend to commemorate their first love. When the media asked me about it, I smiled faintly and said, "To be able to reunite with your first love after all these twists and turns is a fate to be cherished. I wish them happiness." That evening, my fiancée, who had been giving me the cold shoulder for 6 months, uncharacteristically contacted me, telling me not to speak out of turn, and even threatened to cancel the wedding if I didn't clarify things with the media. Little did she know, I didn't want to get married either. When Victoria spent a fortune to buy Ethan's copyright and personally invested heavily in hiring a famous PR team to promote him, I found his novel Time Like Poetry, and read it. My only comment after reading it was that it wasn't very good. It was just an ordinary story about the budding first love of teenagers in school. There were plenty of better written stories out there. But because Ethan wrote about his past with Victoria, she was willing to go to great lengths to promote it, even at the expense of my reputation. And at this time, there was less than a week left until our wedding. When I called her, her assistant answered. It seemed my calls were being forwarded. "Sebastian, Victoria is in a meeting right now. Please call back in 2 hours." "Victoria is very busy with a full schedule every day," the assistant said coldly, seemingly mocking me, a washed-up actor, for being idle. This assistant, who had been with Victoria for the past 2 years, seemed to have noticed the growing distance between us and no longer respected me as before. I smiled and said okay, and hung up. My agent Hannah looked serious and said, "The media reporters have blocked all the exits. It seems we have no choice but to accept the interview." "What did Victoria say?" "I couldn't reach her." "What can she say?" I replied calmly, standing up. "Let's go. We'll say what needs to be said." Hannah was stunned for a moment, then understood my meaning. "What? But wouldn't that be bad? Isn't it good to give a washed-up actor like me some publicity?" I called Victoria to ask how I should handle the media, but she had her assistant brush me off. So I had no reason to spare them any face. I opened the door and walked out. A swarm of reporters rushed towards me, their microphones and excited, gossiping faces crowding in front of me. They asked, "Sebastian, Victoria has been promoting the new writer Ethan. Some people saw them taking a flight to Greece together this morning. What do you think about this? Sebastian, your wedding with Victoria is next week. Will her trip to the island with another man affect the wedding?" Oh, so Victoria wasn't in a meeting but on vacation abroad with Ethan. "Sebastian, some netizens say that the recently popular novel Time Like Poetry is actually about the relationship between the author and Victoria. Is this true?" "Sebastian, Sebastian, Sebastian." The reporters' questions kept coming, and countless flashlights went off in front of me, capturing my every expression. I smiled professionally and spoke loudly and clearly, ensuring everyone could hear. "Yes, everything you guessed is true. As for my opinion, I think that to be able to reunite with your first love after all these twists and turns is a fate to be cherished. I wish them happiness." As expected, this interview made the headlines in the entertainment section. The names of Victoria, Ethan, and I were trending in real time. Social media was flooded with details about the three of us. Ethan's book fans cursed me, a washed-up actor, for trying to steal the spotlight and slandering their brother. But my fans were no less fierce, directly calling Ethan a homewrecker and Victoria a cheater. The onlookers were mostly just enjoying the drama. Some laughed at me for being cuckolded, while others said I deserved it for being a freeloader off Victoria. Overall, though, most people were on my side. They laughed at me but unanimously expressed disgust at Ethan's behavior. After all, I had been in a relationship with Victoria for as long as I had been in the industry. Ethan's book fans couldn't out-argue the onlookers. The more they said, the more they were cursed, so they had to shut up. Some resourceful social media accounts even dug up that Ethan lived in the same neighborhood as us, which made him even more hated. People demanded to rename the neighbor's husband trope to Neighbor Ethan. When I saw this gossip, I was slightly surprised. Ethan lived in the same neighborhood as us? No wonder. Several times I woke up in the middle of the night to find Victoria missing. When I called her, she said she couldn't sleep and was walking in the neighborhood garden. It turned out she was walking to Ethan's place. Realizing this, I checked my feelings and found that besides finding it funny, I felt nothing. It seemed I no longer cared about what Victoria did. Victoria's assistant called me many times and sent several text messages. I didn't even look at them and directly blocked her. It's laughable. Why didn't she do this earlier? I had given her a chance, but she didn't take it. That night, Victoria, who was abroad, probably realized the domestic public opinion had exploded and finally called me. This was the first time in 6 months she had contacted me. It's quite funny, isn't it? We were supposed to get married in less than a week. Everyone in the circle knew we had been in a relationship for 10 years. But she ran off to Santorini with her first love, leaving me in such an embarrassing situation. I answered the call, wanting to hear how Victoria would explain herself. Instead, she started with accusations. Are you crazy? What nonsense did you say to the media? I've worked so hard to promote Ethan, and you've ruined all my efforts. Sebastian, you better issue a statement immediately, saying Ethan is our friend, and that I brought him to Santorini to help us with wedding arrangements. I laughed and asked her, is that true? Victoria's voice was impatient on the other end. True or not, just say it for the PR. Oh, so it's not true. You just wanted to take him there, didn't you? I flatly refused her. I'm afraid I can't do that. Victoria didn't expect my refusal and was silent for half a minute before bursting into anger. What do you mean you can't? You caused this mess with your nonsense, you fix it. I calmly asked her, do you remember our wedding is set to take place at a hotel in the country? Her voice stopped abruptly. I continued, the invitations have been sent out, and the wedding location is clearly stated. You also hired a local wedding planning team. Do you think the media won't find out? Santorini, huh? I remember when we were at our best. You said our wedding must be in Santorini because you wanted everyone to witness our love in front of the romantic Aegean Sea. But when we were really preparing for the wedding, you were very cold, always saying you were busy, that the company had a deal with others and you had no time to go abroad. You said having the wedding at a high-end hotel in the country would be enough. After all, we've been together for so many years. No need to be too particular. Yet now, you took another man to our dreamed wedding destination. Victoria, embarrassed and angry, said, I don't care about that. You fix this mess for me. I don't want any public opinion affecting Ethan when we return, or this wedding is off. She hung up, confident that the threat of canceling the wedding would get her what she wanted. I tossed my phone aside and continued packing my things. Too bad, Victoria. I didn't want to get married either. I've been with Victoria for 10 years and our relationship had always been stable until last year when things started to change. I didn't know Ethan was her first love, only found it odd that Victoria, who was always busy with work, suddenly had time to read novels. She explained that she was looking for suitable works to buy the rights to before they became popular, to adapt into dramas or movies later. So I didn't ask further. Until half a year ago, when Victoria suddenly spent millions to buy the adaptation rights for a novel of less than 300,000 words, and promoted the author to the top writer of the website. She held book signings and hired an agent for him. It was then that I felt something was off and found the novel to read. It was an unremarkable, slow-paced youth novel. I couldn't understand what was worth millions, so I privately investigated the author and found out that Victoria had broken up with her first love right before accepting my confession. That first love was Ethan. I also discovered that it was Victoria who encouraged Ethan to write novels, even promising to help him become famous no matter what he wrote. So, even if the novel was trash, as long as Ethan wrote it and it was about their youthful love, Victoria would buy it. But why? I was Victoria's fiancé, her boyfriend of 10 years. She spent money on rights and promoted her first love for a less than 2-year relationship. What about me? What about our 10 years? I've been in the entertainment industry for years, through highs and lows, never asking Victoria for help. But my beloved fiancée was tirelessly promoting another man. I felt like a big joke. For the first time in 10 years, I was furious at Victoria. I thought she would feel guilty, but instead she sneered, "Sebastian, you're ungrateful. I didn't help you because you have too much pride to ask. But who in the industry doesn't know you're my boyfriend? Just this identity makes people think twice. You think the reason you haven't been replaced despite the fast changes in the entertainment industry is what? It's me, Victoria. I founded Free Spirit Culture and now control most of the industry's resources. You should be grateful that I'm your fiancé, which is why you still have some fame. Don't act all righteous, or I'll make sure you're so forgotten that everyone steps on you." At that moment, seeing Victoria's mocking smile and contempt, I realized I never really knew her. After that argument, Victoria ignored our wedding date and started a cold war with me, even deliberately cutting off my resources. When I was at my peak, I signed with Victoria's company. If she wanted to suppress me, there was nothing I could do. My work was completely halted, almost like being blacklisted. But during these 6 months of Cold War, the contract I signed back then expired. She either forgot or didn't care and never sent me a new renewal contract. During this 6-month Cold War, I doubted and tormented myself, but finally I realized not all relationships bear fruit, and not everyone can accompany you to the end. The termination of my contract with Free Spirit Culture also meant it was time to end my relationship with Victoria. Before I left, Hannah, who brought me into the industry, came to see me off. She and I struggled together in the circle. She was already a well-known agent and could have easily started her own company. But out of old friendship, she signed with Free Spirit Culture with me. After her resources were divided, she too was suppressed by Victoria, indirectly ruining her career because of me. If there's anyone I owe the most these years, it's Hannah. I transferred all my savings to Hannah, hoping to compensate her. But she patted my shoulder and said, "I chose this path myself and accept the consequences." The company gave me 2 renewal contracts and I refused both. She then smiled, "Maybe this is God's way of tempering me, Sebastian. I've decided to start my own agency. Take your money as an investment. I hope when you come back you'll be the top star of my company." I smiled and agreed. Just before going through security, Hannah suddenly called out to me, "Among the things you asked me to get rid of, there's also your wedding ring with her." I understood and told her, "Throw it away, it's not important." The wedding ring was chosen by the wedding planning team Victoria hired without much thought. Letting go of this 10-year relationship meant these symbolic things meant nothing to me. Hannah nodded. "Safe travels. I'll be waiting for you." When the plane landed in the foreign country, I broke my old SIM card and kept only Hannah's contact. I started anew, enrolling in a famous drama school in the US. During the 5 years I was signed with Free Spirit Culture, I went from being a popular leading actor to a fading star. Victoria constantly signed new talents and gave me scripts to bring them fame. She barely filtered the scripts, accepting any that could pass the censors. This resulted in me starring in many poorly received dramas. Some of my anti-fans spread rumors that I took bad projects because I gambled and owed debts. When good scripts or big productions approached me, Victoria would cut in and ask me to give the opportunity to newcomers. She would say, "Sebastian, you're already famous. Taking this role would be icing on the cake, but not taking it won't affect your fame. But so-and-so needs this chance more. The company belongs to both of us. If they become famous, it benefits you too." When my fame diminished and my popularity waned, she turned her back on me, thinking my continued relevance in the industry was solely due to her name. During my time in the shadows, I saw my name frequently appear on netizens' self-made lists of worst actors. I had to admit that the mixed-quality scripts Victoria brought me drained my passion and talent for acting. Being with her not only cost me my acting career, but also made me forget why I entered the industry in the first place. I didn't want to star in one bad drama after another. I wanted to leave a significant mark in the history of Chinese cinema. Leaving Victoria also meant abandoning the past 10 years of my career and starting anew. During this period, I met an overseas Chinese junior named Emily. She was a freshman in the directing department and highly regarded. Her father, James, was a renowned director who had won numerous domestic and international awards. Director James switched to photography at the age of 45 and hadn't directed a film in over a decade. As his only child, Emily naturally garnered a lot of attention as soon as she enrolled. I met her by chance. Director James's films are an important part of world cinema history, so his classic works being analyzed in drama school was expected. We first spoke because of seat disputes. Being older and a foreigner, I usually sat in the back corner, but Emily never sat in the front either. After discovering her favorite seat was taken by me a couple of times, she had to sit next to me. She got smarter and came earlier than me. When I saw my spot taken, I'd come even earlier. After a few rounds of this, she got angry and cursed in Chinese, "Damn, what's wrong with you? The seat isn't yours." Hearing her familiar voice, I got excited. "The seat's not mine, but I got it with my ability." She retorted, "Fine, fine." Then the next class, she came earlier again. In this process of vying for the best seat, we got to know each other. When we got familiar, I asked her, "Why don't you sit in the front, given that this class often discusses your father's films?" She stiffened and didn't speak for a long time. At the end of that day's class, looking at her father's name on the screen, she quietly said, "My dad might be a mountain I can never surpass." I later learned that director James left directing to pursue photography but left the desire to direct to his daughter. Emily grew up under this influence, but as she formally entered the field, she realized how difficult it was to surpass her father's achievements. After all, she's already 26 and has not achieved anything, while her father swept numerous awards with his debut at 23 and was hailed as a genius director. Over time, the pressure on her grew, leading to depression. Watching Emily struggle, I couldn't help but think of my own experiences. Coming from a prestigious academic background, I started my career with major productions. In my third year as an actor, I collaborated with a famous director, reaching the peak of my career. I won my first award, and countless roles and endorsements came my way. I gained both fame and fortune, becoming a new generation actor in the entertainment industry. However, after dissolving my studio and signing with Victoria's company, I felt like a continuously burning candle, exhausting all my enthusiasm. Having been at the top, falling into a quagmire was even more painful. Victoria didn't know that I had been taking antidepressants for a long time. During those 6 months when she froze me out and gave me the cold shoulder, I even self-harmed and attempted suicide, but I eventually pulled through. I decided to abandon everything and start anew. Perhaps Emily found some inspiration from my experience and decided to take a year off. During that year, I wasn't idle, trying various part-time jobs. I worked as a window service attendant at McDonald's, a waiter in a bar, washed dishes in a restaurant, and even did manual labor on construction sites. Having entered the entertainment industry right after college, I lacked real experience and empathy for ordinary people's lives. This year allowed me to see the full spectrum of society and understand how ordinary people struggle to survive. I gradually developed a new understanding of acting. When Emily returned to school, she was equally full of gains. She was preparing to make a short film and invited me to be the lead actor. Of course, I agreed. Emily submitted the film to various short film competitions, achieving excellent results. She finally made a name for herself in the film industry. The success of the short film relieved some of her pressure, bringing an endless stream of inspiration and creativity. Emily took advantage of the momentum to start preparing her debut feature film, even writing the script herself, a quirky suspense drama. She invited me to be the lead actor again. In this film, I played a transgender schizophrenic, a significant challenge for me. We shot the film intermittently for 3 years, both of us under considerable pressure. However, the film was worth the time spent refining it, receiving critical acclaim upon release. Emily's leap to fame came with this film. At 30, she achieved what her father had, a debut feature that swept major film festivals. The media called her a late bloomer. My name also resurfaced with her film. That year, I was 35. Emily's film was also invited to participate in a domestic film festival, and I, as the lead actor, received an invitation. After 5 years abroad, I finally decided to return home. Unlike when I left, unnoticed, Emily and I were warmly welcomed by the media and fans upon arrival. The airport exit was packed, and we were bombarded with questions, until a reporter suddenly asked me, "Sebastian, you left the country 5 years ago and your wedding was canceled. Now that you're back with a new work, will you reunite with Victoria from Free Spirit Culture?" Hearing Victoria's name, I hesitated for a few seconds. After all, 5 years had passed, and I had completely cut off ties with my past, except for Hannah. Hannah had mentioned that Victoria was looking for me when I first arrived in the U.S., but I told Hannah not to bring up Victoria again, so I had no idea how she was doing. I reflexively asked, "She hasn't married Ethan yet?" I thought with all the fanfare she made for her first love, she must be still attached to him. How come the media's tone suggests she isn't married yet? Perhaps my genuine confusion attracted the reporters, who all flocked to me. "Sebastian, have you had no contact with Victoria? Is your relationship with Victoria, as rumored, completely broken?" I couldn't help but laugh. I thought I made it clear 5 years ago. If anyone still doubts, let me reiterate. Victoria and I have no relationship anymore. I wish her happiness with her first love. As for personal questions, that's all. Let's focus on our work. When we finally escaped the reporters and got into the car arranged by Hannah, Emily pulled down her mask and smiled at me. "You said you were a famous actor in the country back then. I didn't believe you. Now I see I underestimated you." I joked, "It's not a good reputation, being remembered for a melodramatic love triangle. I'm worried this might affect the promotion of our film domestically." But Emily, carefree, said, "What's the problem? Your story could even add hype to my film. Although I made it to win awards, more audience means more ticket sales, and I'm all for that." After saying this, she leaned in and whispered, "Do you really have no feelings for your girlfriend of 10 years? I had told Emily about my past with Victoria, and she had once asked if I would choose differently if Victoria didn't want to break up. Now it seems her question was prophetic. Victoria hadn't ended up with Ethan. I knew what Emily was asking. Was there a chance for Victoria and me to reunite? I thought for a moment and told her I just felt annoyed. I had assumed that after I left, Victoria would be happy with Ethan, but to my surprise, she had remained single all these years. I had a premonition that during my time back home she would entangle me, and sure enough, my premonition was correct. The next day, when I went to the company to see Hannah, I ran into Victoria. 5 years had passed, and Victoria had gained a lot of weight. She was older now, and with the weight gain, she no longer had any hint of girlish charm. Her age had increased significantly, and she looked like she was 40. When we saw each other, we were both stunned. Victoria was the first to react, calling my name excitedly, but then her expression changed, and she quickly left. I found it strange. When I reached Hannah's office, I saw she was still angry, and I had a feeling it was related to Victoria. So I asked her. Hannah, hearing I had run into Victoria, couldn't help but curse. Through her words, I pieced together Victoria's experiences over the past 5 years. After I left, Victoria searched for me for 2 days. When she learned from Hannah that I had gone abroad, she got angry and told Hannah to tell me that if I continued to play hard to get, she would replace me with Ethan at the wedding in 2 days. She said I shouldn't regret it, but by then, I had already told Hannah not to tell me anything about Victoria. Hannah understood my resolve, so she didn't convey Victoria's words. "Did she replace me at the wedding?" I asked. Hannah sneered. "Replace you? Could she afford to lose face?" In the end, the wedding didn't happen. When reporters later asked her about it, she said they planned to hold the wedding in Santorini and took Ethan abroad to check the venue. A lame excuse that nobody believed. Victoria's free spirit culture was criticized for this. Her efforts to promote Ethan were also mocked by netizens due to my interference. A youth novel with a small audience was dug up and read by onlookers. Besides a few of Ethan's book fans, most people thought it was just an ordinary, unremarkable youth novel, and they couldn't understand why it was hyped so much. Even websites rated it as the best youth literature. But as the saying goes, to wear the crown, one must bear its weight. With the spotlight Victoria gave Ethan, his work had to stand up to scrutiny. But the book was criticized harshly by readers. Many found that Ethan's novel had sentences very similar to another unknown author's work. So, while Ethan was still embroiled in the scandal of being a homewrecker, another scandal of plagiarism surfaced. Plagiarism in web literature is hard to define, but the original author made a comparison and sued Ethan. The lawsuit dragged on for years without resolution because time, like poetry, lacked literary value. Ethan's honors and earnings were artificially created, and he refused to compensate the original author, thinking the plagiarized work was worthless without Victoria's backing. This illogical thinking led to a prolonged legal battle, with the issue frequently trending online. Netizens demanded apologies from Victoria and Ethan, but Victoria ignored these calls and even formed a team to adapt the novel into a film, sparking widespread outrage. The rushed film production, completed in 6 months, was poorly received despite featuring attractive young actors. The public criticized it heavily, calling it a crappy film forced on them by capitalists. The film, which reportedly had a $200 million budget, ended up making less than $10 million at the box office, a huge loss. In the past, this loss wouldn't have mattered, but Victoria had signed a profit-sharing agreement with investors. The film's failure meant she couldn't meet the contract's performance requirements, resulting in Free Spirit Culture's shares being divided and her being ousted from her position. I asked Hannah, "So why did she come to you?" Hannah rolled her eyes. "Because of your new movie's success. Victoria promoted you as a free spirit artist and booked you for endorsements, only to realize your contract had expired. I quickly announced you had signed with my company, Core Creative. This led to a confrontation with Victoria, but she had no proof you were still under her company, so public opinion sided with me. I finally learned about all these follow-ups. Hannah warned me, given her recent struggles, Victoria might come directly to you. Be prepared." Hannah was right. As I left the company, Victoria hadn't gone. She was waiting for me at the entrance, refusing to leave even when the security guards tried to move her. Seeing me come out, her eyes lit up. "Sebastian, I have something to say to you." I raised my hand to stop the guards. She stood up awkwardly, straightening her clothes. "Long time no see, can we talk?" In a tranquil tea house, Victoria personally brewed tea and placed it in front of me. Despite being the one who wanted to talk, she remained silent. I glanced at the tea. "If you have something to say, just say it." Victoria looked at me with a bitter expression. "I'm sorry." This apology was a stark contrast to her arrogance 5 years ago. Seeing my indifferent expression, her face turned red, then pale. "I never got together with Ethan. It was all a misunderstanding. I didn't mean to break up with you." I smirked, my mouth curling into a mocking smile. Her words grew weaker with my reaction, and a tear fell. She quickly wiped it away. "Is there no chance for us?" I looked at her now plump figure and the loss of her former vigor, but didn't speak. Realizing her changed appearance, her pride wounded, she covered her face. I couldn't help it. The constant socializing and banquets made me gain weight. She cried, "Ethan used me to get famous and then despised me when I got fat. But without me, he was nothing, a useless freeloader." I directly asked her, "So you were still with Ethan after I left, but it didn't work out?" Victoria stiffened at my words. "You're asking if we can get back together, but you clearly have no self-awareness," I said, standing up to leave. "I came to listen out of our 10 years together. If this is all you have to say, then this half hour was wasted." Victoria was stunned. "What do you want to hear?" "What I want to hear is about Free Spirit Culture's shares related to me," I replied. Her face turned even more unpleasant. "Did you think I would talk about the past? This is the only matter left between us. Though our contract ended, the shares still exist. When she signed me during my prime, she promised me 20% of the company's shares and signed a supplementary agreement. But after signing, she forgot about it, and I never received any dividends. I didn't want to argue about money back then, but now I want what's rightfully mine. Seeing her expression, I told Victoria to prepare the compensation for the dividends owed to me, or I would sue. I'd heard from Hannah that free spirit culture had struggled, but I hadn't expected it to be this bad. Less than half an hour after leaving the tea house, Hannah called to say Victoria's mother wanted to speak to me. Intrigued, I used a virtual number to call the number Hannah provided. Unexpectedly, Victoria's mother immediately said, "I agree for you to marry Victoria. No dowry needed. Just forget about the shares. Once you're married, it's all family, so why talk about separate assets?" I was speechless. When I didn't respond, she grew anxious. "You still want the shares? Let me remind you, my daughter had countless suitors, but she wasted her youth waiting for you. You're lucky she didn't ask for compensation. Now that you're famous, you don't want rumors of desertion, do you?" Realizing Victoria's mother hadn't changed, I hung up and asked Hannah to directly sue Victoria for the unpaid dividends, amounting to over $50 million. With this lawsuit, my past feud with Victoria resurfaced. Furious, Victoria released a distorted audio recording of our tea house conversation, portraying herself as a faithful woman, waiting for her boyfriend for 5 years. But the internet remembers. Before I could respond, netizens dug up old news of her promoting Ethan and their trip to Santorini, even finding photos of them sharing a hotel room. This backfired on her. Victoria then publicized our contract, claiming I breached it by signing with another company and demanded damages equal to the $50 million owed to me. Hannah released chat logs and recordings proving that my contract had expired and that Victoria's team repeatedly blocked my renewal. This led to backlash against Free Spirit Culture's executives, who then revealed it was Victoria's vendetta over my argument with Ethan that caused my contract to be withheld. Victoria's past actions were harshly criticized, and even Ethan, who had distanced himself from her, was dragged into the mess again. In the end, Victoria's attempt to reclaim her influence backfired, leaving her more isolated than ever. Although Ethan was embroiled in plagiarism scandals, he still comfortably earned high royalties. However, his writing skills were mediocre. After parting ways with Victoria, his new books didn't gain much traction. Unable to resist, Ethan plagiarized again, this time from a well-known author's early work. The author gathered evidence and won the lawsuit against Ethan. Ethan was thoroughly discredited, his contract terminated, and the website demanded the return of his royalties. Now, burdened with debt and overwhelmed, Ethan lashed out on social media, admitting to his affair with Victoria in Santorini before her wedding and blaming her for everything. Ethan's outburst only muddied the waters further. Meanwhile, I remained silent, letting my legal team handle everything. The court soon ruled that Victoria owed me over $50 million in dividends and interest. After the judgment, Victoria tried several times to rekindle our past, but I refused to see her. Who would believe that a former girlfriend who hadn't contacted me in 5 years still had feelings for me? She only wanted to use me now that I was back on top. Victoria had to sell her property and some shares to pay the $50 million. Once I received the money, I sold my shares in Free Spirit Culture to Victoria's major shareholder. By the time she found out, it was too late. She had lost absolute control over the company. Free Spirit Culture was renamed and merged into the major shareholders' company. After more than a decade of hard work, Victoria ended up working for someone else. Ethan didn't fare any better. His outrageous statements attracted the ire of bored netizens, who even harassed his current girlfriend. The woman who was about to marry Ethan broke up with him. 5 years ago, he ruined my wedding. 5 years later, he lost his fiancée. After that, I stopped paying attention to them. Emily decided to return to the U.S. for further studies after staying in the country for a while. On the day I saw her off, she asked, "Next time, can you still be my leading man?" I nodded, "Of course." Emily smiled mischievously. "I mean, the leading man in my life." I was stunned, but she had already turned and walked into the security checkpoint without looking back, as if her words were just my imagination. Of course, it wasn't until I was nearly 40 that I finally gained her parents' approval, but that's another story.